A brass band had just struck up Stars and Stripes Forever when the first pops ripped through the warm July air. It was 10:14 a.m. on Monday, July 4, 2022, in Highland Park, Illinois. An affluent lakeshore suburb north of Chicago was midway through its annual Independence Day parade. Children waved miniature flags, parents clapped from folding chairs, and a klezmer group on a flatbed truck played on, unaware that the firecracker sounds were rifle shots cascading from a rooftop above Central Avenue. Within seconds, joyous red, white, and blue pageantry turned to chaos. Strollers toppled, lawn chairs flew, and hundreds of spectators sprinted for cover, screaming as a rapid volley echoed down the two-block corridor. Cell phone videos later showed balloons drifting skyward over abandoned coolers, and a woman kneeling to compress a stranger's bleeding shoulder while sirens wailed in the distance. Unseen from street level, a lone gunman had climbed an unsecured exterior ladder to the roof of a Ross Cosmetics building, carrying a Smith & Wesson M&P 15 semi-automatic rifle and 330-round magazines. From that elevated perch, he unleashed 83 rounds into the dense crowd below, targeting anyone in sight: marchers, musicians, toddlers perched on dad's shoulders. 7 people would die, 48 more would suffer bullet or shrapnel wounds, and a community's sense of safety would shatter in less than a minute. Police dispatchers fielded panicked 911 calls. Shots fired, people down, parade route. First responders arriving inside 3 minutes found Central Avenue strewn with flags and shoes but eerily silent. The shooter had already slipped away, disguised in women's clothing to mask his tattoos and blend with fleeing spectators. Officers traced shell casings, recovered the weapon, and broadcast an alert for a 21-year-old local resident, Robert Bobby E. Crimo III, last seen driving a silver Honda Fit. As helicopters circled and SWAT teams canvassed door to door, officials locked down Highland Park, urging residents to shelter in place. Beaches and parks emptied, fireworks shows across northern Illinois canceled in solidarity. The manhunt stretched 8 tense hours until a North Chicago patrol spotted the suspect's vehicle on US 41. After a brief pursuit, Crimo surrendered without incident. Inside the car, police found another rifle and 60 rounds of ammunition. By nightfall, red, white, and blue floodlights illuminated the Illinois state capitol in Springfield, not in celebration but in mourning. Governor J.B. Pritzker condemned the attack as the uniquely American plague of gun violence. President Joe Biden pledged federal support, noting the tragedy came just weeks after mass shootings in Buffalo and Uvalde. Families huddled in living rooms, refreshing news feeds for victims' names while the once festive parade route remained cordoned, evidence markers glinting under portable floodlights. Robert Bobby Crimo III seemed at first glance like just another 20-something drifting through suburban adolescence. He lived with his parents in nearby Highwood, delivered pizzas, and released homemade rap videos under the stage name Awake. Yet behind the veneer of a quiet, slightly eccentric loner grew an obsessive fascination with mass murder that the internet both fed and concealed. Investigators traced his path to the rooftop long before the 4th of July. At age 16, Crimo was already posting graphic drawings of gunmen and blood-soaked stick figures to Discord servers. Classmates later told reporters his notebooks were filled with tally marks and cryptic phrases like "no past, no future, only carnage." In April 2019, police visited the family home after a relative reported Crimo had threatened to kill everyone. Officers confiscated 16 knives, a dagger, and a samurai sword, but, finding no gun, filed the incident as a mental health check and left. Only 3 months later, Crimo walked into a sporting goods store, and after his father signed an Illinois firearm owner's identification (FOID) sponsorship, legally purchased a Smith & Wesson M&P 15, the same rifle he would later aim at parade goers. Background check databases showed no felony convictions, no active protection orders. The prior wellness call had generated no disqualifying record. The sale was approved in minutes. Online, Crimo's persona darkened. TikTok clips showed him wearing armor, dropping shell casings onto a classroom floor set, chanting, "I need to leave now, I need to do it." A YouTube animation depicted a stick-figure gunman shooting at passers-by before turning the rifle on police. Algorithms fed him content tagged shooting and mass attack, while forums traded tips on body armor and high-capacity magazines. He commented rarely but scrolled for hours, absorbing playbooks from Columbine to Uvalde. Family and neighbors noticed warning signs: late-night rooftop pacing, dyed pink hair, tattoos of a smiley face with X's for eyes. Yet when police questioned him in 2020 over a potential suicide attempt, he insisted it was performance art for a music video. Illinois, red flag statute could have barred him from gun ownership had a family member filed a petition, but none did. They feared damaging his job prospects or deepening isolation. By early 2022, Crimo mapped out the parade assault. Cell tower data show repeated late-night drives along Central Avenue, Google searches for July 4 Highland Park road closures, and purchases of women's clothing from a thrift store, part of the disguise he would use to flee. 2 weeks before the attack, he uploaded a final rap track titled, "I Am the Storm," its lyrics an ode to dawn of red splatter. YouTube's content algorithm flagged it as borderline violent imagery but left it public, restricted only to users over 18. The night of July 3, he packed the rifle, 3 magazines, and a GoPro camera, later recovered unopened, into a black duffel. At 5:45 a.m. on the 4th, he parked a block from the parade route, climbed the rear ladder of Ross Cosmetics, and lay prone behind the roof wall for nearly 5 hours, streaming police scanner audio through earbuds while families below set out lawn chairs. At 10:14 a.m., a quick staccato of muzzle flashes announced the nightmare. From his rooftop perch, Robert Crimo loosed the first burst, 9 rounds in under 4 seconds, into the densest knot of spectators clustered around the reviewing stand. A trumpet player fell mid-note. A Boy Scout leader shoved 2 Webelos beneath the troop banner just as the second burst cracked overhead. Screams ricocheted off brick facades that moments earlier had echoed only salsa marches. On the street below, chaos split into instinctive triage. Parents hurled themselves over strollers, teens dragged grandparents behind parked cars, and marching band chaperones used bass drums as makeshift shields. Amid the stampede, Dr. Wendy Rush, an anesthesiologist marching with the local hospital float, dropped to her knees beside a man hit in the thigh, clamped pressure with a parade sash, and yelled for tourniquets, the first of dozens improvised from belts and flag poles. Highland Park police officers posted along Central Avenue needed seconds to triangulate the shots to rooftop level. Sergeant Chris Cavelli radioed, "Elevated shooter, cosmetics roof, deploy rifle teams, evac south." 2 officers sprinted toward the alley, firing cover rounds that forced Crimo to roll back from the parapet. In that pause, many victims crawled into storefronts as shop owners yanked them inside, locking doors and overturning display racks for barricades. The shooter swapped magazines, 30 rounds gone, 60 more ready, and resumed, sweeping left to right. Bullet fragments shattered a plate glass window, sending shards across a food truck vendor who had already thrown himself over a toddler. In the din, a combat veteran named Alexander Sandoval crawled forward, his Marine training kicking in. He barked directions for strangers to form a human chain, ferrying the wounded toward a landscaping trailer repurposed as a casualty collection point. By 10:16 a.m., 6 victims lay motionless on the pavement. More than 20 others bled from arms, legs, necks. Sirens converged, Highland Park, Park District, Lake County Sheriff. Paramedics staged a block away until officers confirmed the shooter's field of fire had shifted. On the roof, Crimo fired his last burst, then dropped the rifle beside spent casings. He slipped down the rear ladder, doffed a patterned women's scarf to hide face tattoos, and blended into the stream of terrified evacuees heading west. Police arrived on the roof within 3 minutes, finding only the weapon and a shell casing litter that told its own grim arithmetic. 83 shots, 3 magazines, calculated pauses for reload. A ballistic vest and GoPro were stashed in a backpack, evidence he'd planned to record slaughter but abandoned the camera in haste. As EMS teams flooded Central Avenue, ordinary citizens became first responders. Barbers from a nearby salon cut gauze strips from smocks. A yoga instructor used meditation blankets as splints. Jewel grocery employees passed out gloves and bottled water. Cell phones served as flashlights searching for exit wounds under crimson-soaked t-shirts. The triage team flagged red tags on those critical, yellow on stable, black for the souls beyond saving. Lake County's emergency radio broadcast an all-points bulletin. Be on lookout, silver Honda Fit, plates DM80653, armed and dangerous. At 11:10 a.m., Crimo appeared on a Ring doorbell camera jogging through an alley in Highwood, then vanished. Police locked down a 2-mile radius, but he had already driven north on Route 41, passing police cruisers racing south toward the chaos he left. Back at the parade route, surgeons turned parking lots into operating theaters. A 64-year-old grandfather with chest wounds received an emergency thoracostomy under a pop-up tent. 2 bystanders held IV bags high while paramedics ventilated him with a handheld ambu bag. Across the street, a teenager with a shattered femur clutched a Chicago Cubs cap, whispering, "Tell Mom I'm okay," as volunteers hoisted him onto a plywood backboard. The official death toll rose to 7 when Jackie Sundheim, a beloved synagogue events coordinator, succumbed en route to Evanston Hospital. Each confirmed fatality rattled through radio chatter, turning officers' jaws to stone behind tactical helmets. Governor Pritzker activated state resources, and FBI agents arrived by noon, setting up a mobile command post. The manhunt reached peak tension mid-afternoon. A Highland Park detective discovered Crimo's abandoned cell phone near the parade route, its last map search reading Wisconsin gas prices, suggesting flight north. Alerts flashed on Illinois tollway message boards. Suspect armed, driving silver Honda Fit. Motorists phoned in sightings. Squad cars leapfrogged ramps trying to intercept. At 6:34 p.m., a North Chicago officer spotted the Honda exiting Route 41. Backup boxed the car near Wesley Road. Dashcam footage later showed Crimo stepping out slowly, hands raised, face blank as if exiting a trance. In the trunk, police found a loaded Kel-Tec Sub 2000 rifle and 60 rounds, proof he intended further carnage if escape proved possible. Back in Highland Park, dusk settled on a street still littered with forgotten strollers and upturned folding chairs. Candles flickered beside stuffed animals where evidence cones had stood hours earlier. Residents gathered for a spontaneous vigil, singing "America the Beautiful" through tears. The smell of cordite had barely drifted away, replaced by the waxy tang of memorial candles. With the shooter in custody, Highland Park shifted overnight from rescue to investigation, grief to accountability. Detectives tore through digital breadcrumbs, search histories for 4th of July parade start time, GoPro tutorials on rooftop angles, and message board posts where Robert Crimo asked about bullet drop at 50 feet. A forensics team cloned 3 laptops, 2 phones, and a hard drive stacked with self-produced animations of stick figures alongside the text, "A new dawn is coming." Each file became future evidence, and fuel for public outrage that so many warning signs went unheeded. On July 7, Lake County State's Attorney Eric Reinhart filed an unprecedented 117 felony counts, 21 of first-degree murder, 3 per victim, 48 of attempted murder, and 48 of aggravated battery with a firearm. The indictment argued that every bullet had a name and a charge. At the bond hearing, Crimo appeared via video, shoulders slumped in a button-down borrowed from jail stock. Prosecutors outlined the carnage. The judge ordered him held without bail, citing overwhelming proof and the likelihood he would inspire copycats if ever released. A grand jury convened within 2 weeks, hearing testimony from officers, trauma surgeons, and digital forensics experts who projected Crimo's YouTube manifesto across the courtroom wall. Jurors needed barely an hour to hand up the full bill, setting the stage for a death penalty-eligible trial. Though Illinois abolished capital punishment in 2011, federal charges remained possible if prosecutors sought that route. Even as legal gears turned, a louder debate erupted. How had Illinois Firearms Restraining Order (FRO) law, its red flag statute, failed? The 2019 police wellness check and knife seizure should, critics argued, have triggered a petition to block firearm purchases. Instead, Crimo's father signed as sponsor on the FOID card application, clearing the state background check. Lawmakers demanded fixes: automatic cross-referencing of mental health calls, mandatory waiting periods for under 21 applicants even with parental consent, and penalties for adults who knowingly enable purchases later used in crimes. Survivors and families testified before the legislature in packed hearings. A young parade volunteer rolled up his pant leg to show shrapnel scars, asking, "What color flag did you need?" Pediatric surgeon Dr. Mark Talamonte recounted the operating room chaos and offered a surgeon's prescription: banned civilian sale of high-capacity magazines. By January 2023, those pleas crystallized into the Protect Illinois Communities Act, prohibiting future sales of assault-style weapons and limiting magazine capacity to 10 rounds. Governor Pritzker signed it, flanked by Highland Park first responders, though lawsuits challenging the measure began filing before the ink dried. Meanwhile, the city faced its own July 4 on the calendar. Officials canceled the 2023 parade and replaced it with a walk of remembrance along Central Avenue. At 10:14 a.m., the exact moment shots rang out a year prior, church bells tolled 7 times, once for each life lost. Catherine Goldstein, Jacqueline Sundheim, Stephen Strauss, Nicholas Toledo Zaragoza, and married couple Kevin and Irina McCarthy, whose 2-year-old son Aiden had been found wandering under his father's body, plus Eduardo Uvaldo, who died the next day. Families placed white roses beneath their photos, and the crowd observed a 51-second silence, mirroring the length of the rifle volley. Therapists from the Resiliency Center stood by with grief counselors. Over 12 months, they had logged more than 5,000 sessions, treating everything from survivors' guilt to toddlers who dived under tables at the sound of fireworks. The city funded art therapy for schoolchildren. One mural now spans a downtown wall, depicting a broken trumpet whose notes bloom into monarch butterflies. As court dates inch closer, Crimo's defense signaled a possible insanity plea, citing long-standing delusional thoughts. Prosecutors countered with recorded jail calls where he joked about podcast interviews and asked relatives to check TikTok views. Mental health evaluators declared him fit, noting he understood charges and aided counsel, key criteria under Illinois law. Federal agencies continued parallel inquiries into potential online accomplices who had shared tactical advice. No co-conspirator charges have surfaced, but subpoenas revealed Crimo purchased 1,000 rounds of ammunition through out-of-state websites that never flagged the volume. Senators used the finding to push for interstate reporting thresholds, yet another legislative aftershock of a single minute's gunfire. As autumn 2023 approached, the Highland Park case entered a new phase, part public courtroom drama, part national referendum on red flag enforcement. Judge Victoria Rossetti set jury selection for January 2024, anticipating 6 weeks to seat an impartial panel despite wall-to-wall media coverage. Defense attorneys signaled an insanity defense, citing Crimo's history of suicidal ideation and online delusions. Prosecutors countered with a trove of evidence showing meticulous planning. Roof angle sketches, ammo spreadsheets, a practice video recording a watermelon exploding from rifle fire. Pre-trial motions argued over whether jurors should see these digital diaries. The judge ruled most admissible, calling them windows into intent. Simultaneously, civil lawsuits piled up. Victims, families sued Crimo, his father, for sponsoring the FOID card, Smith & Wesson, for marketing to young men with violent imagery, and 2 online ammo retailers that shipped 1,000 rounds without verifying age. The suits allege negligent entrustment and deceptive advertising under Illinois consumer law. Gun rights groups decried blame the tool litigation, but legal scholars watch closely. A favorable ruling could crack open novel liability theories modeled after the Sandy Hook-Remington settlement. Legislatively, Highland Park's trauma propelled Illinois into the vanguard of gun safety policy. The Protect Illinois Communities Act survived its first constitutional challenge in state court. Opponents appealed to the Seventh Circuit, arguing it violated the Supreme Court's 2022 Brune ruling on the Second Amendment. Briefs cited divergent historical analogs, 18th-century restrictions on dangerous and unusual weapons versus modern militia interpretations. Oral arguments are scheduled for December 2025, making the case a potential path back to the High Court. Meanwhile, the state police launched FRO 2.0, integrating mental health call logs and domestic violence reports into the background check queue. Early metrics show a 38% uptick in firearm restraining order petitions, most filed by family members after public education campaigns that featured Highland Park survivors urging, "Speak before you mourn." One petition disarmed an unstable Navy veteran in Peoria who had stockpiled body armor and Googled county fair grandstand seating, an eerie echo of Crimo's search patterns. On the cultural front, communities nationwide re-engineered July 4th celebrations. Cities from Portland, Maine, to San Jose swapped traditional parades for static festivals, closed perimeter block parties with entry checkpoints, and elevated observation towers for police snipers. Some residents applauded the sense of security. Others mourned the loss of hometown Americana. Highland Park itself held no parade in 2024, opting again for a morning remembrance walk and an evening drone light show depicting doves instead of fireworks that might trigger PTSD. Mental health services expanded in tandem. The Rebuild Resiliency Center, created with Federal Victims of Crime Act funds, reported treating more than 9,000 clients across 2 years, from direct survivors to first-grade teachers who heard the shots half a mile away and now flinch at fire drills. Therapists introduced EMDR sessions under portable skylights to mimic parade daylight safely. Outcome studies show a 60% reduction in flashback frequency after 6 weeks of treatment. Data social workers hope will secure additional grants when initial funding sunsets in 2026. As the trial loomed, Highland Park's public safety team instituted roof check patrols for all major gatherings. Officers log each accessible ladder, fire escape, and low roofline before events. The practice caught on across suburban Chicago. Roofing companies even added tamper-proof ladder locks to service packages, branding them Highland Guards. Critics worry such fortification normalizes siege mentality, but parents counter. If we can baby-proof a coffee table, we can rooftop-proof a parade. January 2024 arrived with sub-zero wind chill and throngs of satellite trucks outside Lake County Courthouse. Jury selection stretched 3 weeks as attorneys quizzed prospects about social media exposure, PTSD triggers, and willingness to view graphic footage. A panel of 8 women and 4 men, plus 4 alternates, took oaths under admonitions to avoid all coverage. Opening statements painted clashing narratives. The prosecution framed Crimo as a self-made soldier of hate who turned a national birthday into a bloodbath. The defense described a broken young man drowning in delusion, hinting schizophrenia and advocating psychiatric confinement over life imprisonment. First witnesses included parade survivors who relived the 51-second barrage through slowed 911 audio. Jurors gripped armrests as the soundtrack pivoted from piccolos to screams. A trauma surgeon displayed recovered fragments, each tagged with the victim's name, evidence that transformed ballistics into biography. Mid-trial, a bombshell. Prosecutors played an unreleased cell phone clip showing Crimo filming the crowd minutes before climbing the ladder, whispering, "This is it, manifest." The defense scrambled, arguing the voice was too garbled for authentication. The judge admitted the video, noting distinctive arm tattoos matched booking photos. Courtroom gasps gave way to silent tears among family rows. Snow still dusted the courthouse steps when jurors filed back into the Lake County courtroom on March 14, 2024, faces pale and drawn after 14 hours of deliberation. Foreperson Jeanette Morales stood, voice barely above a whisper, and read the verdicts one by one. Guilty on all 117 counts, every murder, every attempted murder, every aggravated battery. Jurors rejected insanity, accepting prosecution arguments that Robert Crimo planned the massacre with methodical, chilling clarity. A muffled sob rose from the victim's gallery. Across the aisle, Crimo stared ahead, expressionless, as though watching someone else's fate unfold. Illinois law mandated a separate sentencing phase. Over 3 days, survivors described permanent nerve damage, night terrors, children who dive under desks at thunderclaps. Pathologists showed X-rays of bullets that could never be removed without crippling victims further. Defense psychiatrists reiterated childhood trauma, but prosecutors countered with a jail phone call in which Crimo joked about movie deals. On March 20, Judge Rossetti delivered sentence: 7 consecutive life terms without parole plus 310 years. A stack of time ensuring the 23-year-old would die behind razor wire. She ended with a stark line: "Your rooftop war ended 7 lives and wounded a nation. You will never hear another parade." Outside, church bells tolled 7 times, echoing across Central Avenue, now repaved and lined with planter boxes bearing plaques of each victim's name. Reporters asked families if justice felt complete. Irina McCarthy's sister answered for many: "Accountability, yes. Closure, there is no closure." Still, the verdict galvanized ongoing reforms. Legal fallout. In May 2024, Smith & Wesson settled the civil suit for an undisclosed sum and agreed to halt digital ads depicting young men alone with tactical rifles. Ammunition retailers instituted age verification databases and daily quantity flags. Crimo's father accepted a negligence settlement with victims' families, prompting Illinois lawmakers to pass the Parental Liability Enhancement Act, extending civil responsibility to any sponsor of a gun license later used in violent crime. The Seventh Circuit upheld the Protect Illinois Communities Act in a 2-1 decision, citing Highland Park's compelling public safety interest. Plaintiffs petitioned the Supreme Court. As of this script, certiorari remains pending. Nationwide repercussions. Independence Day 2024 unfolded under unprecedented security. More than 30 cities adopted Highland Park-style roof-check protocols, and at least a dozen ditched marching parades for stationary festivals with baggage screening. The Department of Homeland Security issued new guidance labeling elevated position shooters a Tier 1 emerging threat, unlocking federal funds for mobile observation platforms and drone patrols at public events. Congress, gridlocked on assault weapon bans, found narrow common ground in data. The The Bipartisan Red Flag Improvement Act of 2025 earmarked $750 million for state overhauls mirroring Illinois, FRO 2. Zero database. Grants require training law enforcement officers on filing petitions and educating families about warning signs. Training videos feature Highland Park survivors explaining how silence nearly cost them their lives. Community healing. The Rebuild Resiliency Center secured additional funding through 2028 after outcome studies showed 70% of patients achieved significant PTSD symptom reduction. Schools embedded trauma-informed drills, still practicing lockdowns but ending sessions with mindfulness exercises to de-escalate anxiety. Local artists installed the Butterfly Passage, a tunnel of mirrored panels reflecting sky and passerby, symbolizing transformation. Each mirror edge etched with the phrase, "May their memory move us forward." On the first parade-less 4th after sentencing, residents gathered for the Walk of Hope. They carried sunflowers, 7 petals dipped in gold leaf to represent those lost. At 10:14 a.m. they paused, not in silence but in song, belting Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah as church bells joined in. Tears mixed with smiles, grief and resilience in the same breath. Personal ripples. 2-year-old Aidan McCarthy, orphaned that day, began preschool clutching a plush dinosaur EMTs gave him amid the chaos. Community donations fully funded his education trust. Alexander Sandoval, the Marine who orchestrated the human chain, entered nursing school, specializing in emergency care. His scholarship essay ended, "I learned medicine on a sidewalk. Now I'll practice it in an ER." Dr. Wendy Rush helped lobby for the street medic Good Sam law, granting legal immunity to civilians who perform improvised trauma care in mass casualty events. Highland Park's journey has become a template for other towns wrestling with post-attack rebuilding. Yet residents are keen to stress that a blueprint cannot replace vigilance. Central Avenue shops now display small placards, white stars on blue background, reading, "See something, say now." Tips about unsecured ladders or suspicious rooftop loitering stream into the non-emergency hotline weekly. Most turn out harmless. Officers still log every one. Epilogue. Robert Crimo occupies a solitary cell at Pontiac Correctional Center, 23 hours per day. No internet. The digital stage that once nurtured his fantasies forever dark. He receives no mail except filtered legal notices. A patch of sky the size of a manila envelope is visible during yard time. Fireworks, parades, and scrolling feeds are distant noises he will never touch again. Highland Park, by contrast, pulses with renewed determination. Cafes host purple latte mornings, donating proceeds to trauma therapy. School bands rehearse under outdoor awnings, their salsa marches rippling across sidewalks once stained with panic. Each brass note stands as quiet defiance. A community refuses to surrender melody to muzzle flash. So where does that leave the rest of us? The rooftop threat remains, yet so does the blueprint for resistance. Early petitions, secure ladders, watchful neighbors, and collective courage to intervene before warning signs calcify into headlines. If this series has taught anything, let it be that safety is not granted by tradition. It is built, foot by vigilant foot, note by resilient note. Thank you for walking through every chapter of this difficult story. If you believe these lessons can prevent tomorrow's silence, share them. Like, subscribe, and add your voice in the comments. What preventative step, big or small, can your own community adopt before the next parade day dawns? Together, we can make sure Skylines host nothing more lethal than confetti drifting on summer wind.